I've always been a skeptic, so when my friends dared me to spend a night in the notoriously haunted room 217 at the Baker Hotel, I accepted without hesitation. The Baker Hotel, situated in a small town about 2 hours away, was famous for its disturbing past. Built in the early 1900s, it had been a place where socialites and celebrities gathered. However, stories of hauntings began circulating shortly after a woman named Margaret fell to her death from room 217. Ever since, visitors claimed to hear strange noises, footsteps, and even spectral sightings. All nonsense, I thought. A week later, I was standing in front of room 217 with a duffel bag, my phone fully charged to document this little adventure. I was doing this not just to win a bet, but to debunk the myth surrounding this so-called haunted room. The room was unsettlingly ordinary: a queen-seated bed with faded linen, a dusty chandelier, and worn-out wallpaper. "This is what people are afraid of," I muttered to myself, feeling more amused than apprehensive. I did a quick tour of the room, recording everything on my phone. "See guys, no ghosts here. You owe me $100, I said, speaking into the camera. I threw my duffel bag on the bed and decided to do some reading until I got sleepy. Around midnight, the fatigue began to set in. I was about to call it a night when I heard a faint sound, an echo that seemed to come from the bathroom. Startled, I grabbed my phone and started recording again as I cautiously stepped towards the bathroom door. I pushed it open. The bathroom was just as ordinary as the rest of the room, but the mirror above the sink caught my attention. It was fogged up, as if someone had just taken a hot shower. As I stood there, puzzled, a message began to form on the foggy mirror. "Why did you come?" My heart was pounding. This had to be a prank, I thought. I wiped away the message with a towel and turned around to leave, but then I heard it. A soft sobbing, echoing from somewhere within the room. I walked back into the main room and scanned it carefully. There was no one there. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Room 217 is not what it seems." I immediately grabbed my duffel bag and dashed for the door, but as I reached for the knob, it wouldn't budge. Panicked, I rammed my shoulder against it until it finally swung open. I ran down the hallway, down the stairs, and didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for air. The next morning, I reviewed the footage on my phone. Everything seemed normal until I reached the part where I heard the sobbing. The video showed the room's chair rocking gently by itself, and for a brief second, a shadowy figure appeared in the background. My blood ran cold. After some sleepless nights, I started researching room 217 and Margaret's story in particular. Apparently, she was deeply unhappy in her marriage and suspected her husband was unfaithful. She had written letters to a friend saying she felt trapped and was seeking a way out. The letters were found in room 217 after her death, but were never publicly disclosed. The text message I received that night suddenly made sense. I don't claim to understand what happened in room 217. Maybe it was Margaret reaching out, or maybe it was something else. All I know is that some stories, even those we want to dismiss as mere myths, may have a foundation in reality. I still consider myself a skeptic, but a skeptic with one inexplicable experience that defies everything I thought I knew. And so, I share this story not as a believer, but as a witness. Room 217 is not what it seems, and neither is our understanding of the world we inhabit. I don't normally talk about what happened at 47 Cedar Street. As a rational person, I've always relied on the laws of physics and the tangibility of what can be touched, seen, or scientifically measured. But sometimes you encounter something so utterly inexplicable that your worldview shatters, leaving you groping in the dark for answers. That's what happened to me, and I've finally gathered the courage to write it down. I've always been a history buff, especially when it comes to architecture. That's why I couldn't resist the pull of 47 Cedar Street, a Victorian mansion built in the late 1800s, currently on the market for a suspiciously low price. My initial thought was that it needed some serious renovation, given its age. My second thought was that it might make a great project, a future bed and breakfast perhaps. My first visit to the mansion was with Marcus, my real estate agent. The house was grand, if a bit weathered, its wooden exterior crying out for a fresh coat of paint. Inside, the air was stuffy, filled with the odor of decay and abandonment. Marcus pointed out the high ceilings, the intricate moldings, the remnants of what was once perhaps a glorious residence. The tour was uneventful until we reached a particular room on the second floor. It was noticeably colder, and I felt a sudden chill crawl up my spine. "That's the nursery," Marcus said with a slight hesitation. "It has been sealed for years, and we don't have the key." "Why is that?" I pressed, curious. "It's just one of those old house quirks," he replied evasively. I could tell he was withholding something, but decided to let it go. After a bit more negotiating than I expected, the house was mine. The previous owners seemed almost too eager to get rid of it, which should have been my first red flag. But blinded by the thrill of restoring the mansion to its former glory, I dived into renovations. One evening, after a long day of overseeing construction, I decided to spend the night at the mansion. I'd bought a blow-up mattress and set it up in what would become the master bedroom. That's when I heard it for the first time, the soft wail of a baby. At first I thought I was dreaming, but then it happened again, a lingering cry echoing through the hallways. I grabbed a flashlight and began to explore, the sound growing louder as I approached the sealed nursery. Against my better judgment, I picked the lock and pushed the door open. The room was empty, the air thick with a cold that was almost solid. As I shined the flashlight around the room, it flickered and went out. That's when I saw them. Tiny, glowing handprints appearing on the window pane, vanishing as quickly as they appeared. Then, a soft, melodic lullaby filled the room, sung by a woman's voice, rich and full of sorrow. I ran out, slamming the door behind me, and spent the rest of the night in my car. The next day, I met Mrs. Simmons, an elderly neighbor who had lived next to 47 Cedar Street for decades. Reluctantly, I told her what had happened, half expecting her to laugh. Instead, her face turned ashen. "The house is haunted, dear," she said gravely. "You see, the original owners had a child who died in that nursery. The mother was so distraught she took her own life. They say her spirit is bound to that room, forever mourning her lost child." I nodded, skeptical but unnerved. Could a place hold onto tragedy, imprinting it into its very walls? I didn't believe in ghosts, but how else could I explain what I'd experienced? I could have left, put the house back on the market, and forgotten all about it. But something compelled me to stay. Perhaps it was the historian in me, yearning to uncover the truths buried within the mansion's rotting wood and peeling paint. So, I made a decision. I hired a local medium, a woman named Claire, who was reputed to be the real deal. She agreed to perform a cleansing ceremony in the nursery. When Claire stepped into the room, her face went white and she gasped. "There's a powerful energy here," she said, filled with sorrow. "We have to proceed carefully." Following her instructions, we set up candles in a circle, and Claire began to chant. As her voice rose, the temperature in the room dropped precipitously. My breath turned into visible mist, and the candles flickered, struggling to stay lit. And then we heard it, a soft, feminine voice joining the chant. The spectral lullaby from that terrifying night filled the room, harmonizing with Claire's incantations. The walls seemed to breathe, contracting and expanding as if the house itself was alive. Suddenly, the handprints reappeared on the window, glowing brighter than before. Claire's chant reached a feverish pitch, and with a final resounding note, the handprints faded away, the temperature normalized, and an overwhelming sense of peace filled the room. Claire nodded approvingly. She's gone, freed from her earthly binds. And she was right. From that day on, the nursery warmed up. The air lost its suffocating weight, and the rest of the renovations proceeded without incident. But I could never shake the feeling that something else still lurked in the mansion. Something older, darker, waiting for its turn to make itself known. That's why I sold the mansion, passing it on to someone else, someone perhaps better equipped to deal with whatever remained. As for me, I've relocated to a small, modern apartment with no history and no lingering spirits. But even now, as I walk through brightly lit hallways and freshly painted rooms, I sometimes hear the distant echo of a lullaby, a haunting melody that serves as a constant reminder that some pasts refuse to be forgotten. I was always fond of abandoned places. There was something exhilarating about exploring the decaying remnants of the past. So when I found out about the abandoned subway station beneath the heart of the city, I knew I had to see it. I researched it for weeks, reading stories about it being a relic from the Cold War era, designed to serve as a bomb shelter for city officials. It was closed off in the 80s due to safety concerns, but everyone knew it was because of the alarming number of unexplained incidents. I spoke to a friend who was equally intrigued by urban exploration. Sarah was a freelance photographer and thought this could be an exciting photo project. One Friday evening, armed with flashlights, cameras, and a sense of adventure, we decided to make the descent. We entered through a crumbling service tunnel that led to the subway platform. The air was thick with dampness, and the smell of mildew filled our nostrils as we went deeper. Once we reached the platform, we were greeted by an eerie sight. The walls were covered in graffiti, some old and faded, others eerily fresh. It looked like a canvas of madness, faces, symbols, and words that seemed to be in languages I couldn't identify. I felt a lump forming in my throat. Something about this place was unsettling, to say the least. Sarah started snapping pictures, her camera flash briefly illuminating the dark corners of the station. As she moved farther down the platform, I decided to explore one of the old train compartments. It was a rusted, skeletal shell, its seats torn and windows shattered. Then I saw it. A message scratched into the metal wall of the compartment. "Do not speak to them." A chill ran down my spine. Who were them? And why was this message here? I immediately went back to the platform to find Sarah. She was standing near the tunnel where the train tracks disappeared into darkness. "Did you see this?" She pointed her flashlight at the wall next to the tunnel. More graffiti, but this was different. A detailed mural of what seemed like shadowy figures, with elongated limbs and distorted faces. Around them were words written in what looked like Latin. I felt a sense of dread wash over me. "We need to leave, now!" Before Sarah could respond, we heard a sound echoing from the tunnel. A low, rumbling noise, almost like a distant train. But that was impossible. No trains had run through this station for decades. We looked at each other, our faces pale in the dim light, and started backing away. That's when we heard the voices, soft whispers that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Incoherent at first, but gradually forming words. "Stay with us." Our flashlights flickered as if reacting to the voices, and Sarah's camera slipped from her hand, shattering on the platform. We turned and ran, scrambling back through the service tunnel as fast as we could, our footsteps echoing behind us as if being chased by the whispers. We burst out into the night, gasping for air, and didn't stop running until we reached the car. We drove in silence, each of us processing what had just happened. The next day, I looked through the photos Sarah had taken. Most of them were just as you'd expect. Decayed walls, rusty compartments, cryptic graffiti. But the last picture made my heart stop. It was a photo of the mural next to the tunnel, and standing among the shadowy figures were what looked like two more recent additions, crudely drawn likenesses of Sarah and me. We never spoke of that night again and never returned to the station. Sarah moved away a few months later, and I heard she gave up urban exploration entirely. As for me, I'm still drawn to abandoned places, but I'm more cautious now, more respectful, because some places are abandoned for a reason, and some messages, no matter how cryptic, are warnings that should not be ignored. Before you go double-checking your locks and peering into dark corners, do us a little favor that won't cost you a dime but keeps our channel alive. Hit that like button if these stories sent shivers down your spine. It helps us know that we're delivering the kinds of scares you crave. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. What was the most terrifying moment for you? Do you have a real-life horror story of your own? Drop your tale in the comments below, and who knows, your story might be the one that haunts our next episode. Finally, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and ring that notification bell. That way you'll never miss a chance to tremble in fear with each new story we bring to your screen. Thank you for spending your time with us tonight on Shadowy Screams TV. Remember, the next time you hear something go bump in the night, it might just be one of our stories coming to life. Until next time, sleep tight. Or at least try to.